Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Mickey Loomis took to the podium on Tuesday for his annual pre-draft press conference, or as I should say it, his annual ritual of not answering a damn thing. And why would you? I don't blame him, again, at all. Like, no GM should give you a definitive answer to anything. All they should do is use the media as a tool to spin whatever narrative they want to that's going to be beneficial for their franchise. But Mickey Loomis was asked on the 2024 draft class as a whole.
Well, I think it's a good year for offensive players. That's probably the way I'd put it. A little better, offensively than defensively. And yet, man, I just know that 3 or 4 years from now, we're going to look back and there's going to be some great defensive players come out of this draft, and we're going to say, why didn't we see that? Or it should have been obvious. So,
yes, there are going to be great defensive players in the draft, as there are in every draft. That goes without saying. But Mickey Loomis even acknowledged there, when you're looking at your board, this seems to be an offensive-heavy draft, in particular at, 3 positions. It's offensive line, receiver, and certainly quarterback, which is the big story. But with the Saints very much not in the market for a quarterback, no matter how much we all may want to convince ourselves that they might be in the market for a quarterback, taking a flyer in the mid or late round on a player, they're not going to be in the market for a quarterback. The Saints are financially committed, desperately committed to Derek Carr for the next 2 years, as we've gone through. Derek Carr's contract, after they restructured it, makes it impossible to move him over the next 2 years. His dead cap number in 24 is $62.8 million. His dead cap number in 2025 is $50 million. You are not going to pay a man $50 million to not be on your team. So you are financially pot committed to Derek Carr for at least 2 more years. The only way he's not your quarterback is if you have a Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady, Trent Green, Kurt Warner type situation, where you have your franchise quarterback who gets injured and the rookie unheralded draft pick or free agent comes in and wins the job. Like, that's the only way that something like that could happen. So you go into this draft trying to build offensively around Derek Carr, as we well know. But what I think is the most interesting thing for this team, and we understand that tackle is what they're going to be targeting at 14. It's nearly impossible to think of a scenario where they're targeting anything other than tackle at 14, considering Ryan Ramczyk's injury situation, that you don't have a left tackle, and this is a deep tackle class in this draft. That's what you're going to do. But the Saints are notorious for moving up. They're rarely, if ever, patient. They're never patient throughout an entire draft. Their strategy has been, if we see a player and we see value, we don't wait for them to fall to us. We get aggressive and we go get them. So Loomis was asked, and this was a good glimpse into the psychology of how that draft room works for New Orleans, on whether or not they map out these scenarios before the draft.
We're at 14, for example. I'm going to look at, what's it take to get to 13? What's it take to get to 12? 11, 10, 9, 8. That's probably about where I'd cut it off. And I'll go back. How far back are we willing to go? Generally, I'm going to look 10 spots in front and 10 spots behind. And then I'm going to spend a lot of time in the next couple days saying, hey, what's the value of that? What's it going to take? What's the history in our league when somebody's traded from 14 to 10, 14 to 9, whatever? And what's the history of going from 14 back to, 20? And then there'll be a lot of calls over the next 2 or 3 days to those GMs and those teams in front of us and those teams behind us. Hey, what are you thinking? Are you have an inclination to come forward? You have an inclination to go back? We'll have an idea of what might be available.
It feels like, so the short answer to the question is yes, you do map out those scenarios. I thought that was a really compelling answer, especially talking about speaking with 2 parts of that. Speaking with other teams. Would you have an inclination to come up or back? So whenever you're on the clock and you have that 10-minute window, you're not, you know who your potential buyers or sellers are already. You don't have time in that window to call 32 teams. So you've already shrunk that number to say, okay, who behind us might be willing to come up if we're looking to move back, sort of thing. That's one. The other, I don't know if you caught this, But it said that they look 10 spots up and 10 spots back. Well, 10 spots up would be 4, right? You're sitting at 14. If you're looking 10 spots up, that gets you all the way to 4. But what Mickey Loomis said very clearly there is what would it take to go, to 10, to 9, to 8? Well, and he said point blank that he wouldn't likely go beyond 8. So put yourself in the mindset of, okay, what player could be available at 8 if that's really as high as he would go? Well, you're not moving up to 8 for a quarterback. So like if J.J. McCarthy's still on the board or something like that, you're not moving there. Really, it would be like one of 3 scenarios. Number 1 would be if you think, like hypothetically, if you think Joe Alt is the best offensive lineman in this draft, like just transcendent. You think Joe Alt, if you take Joe Alt, he's Willie Roaf. If you take any of the other ones, yes, they're very good starting caliber players in the NFL, but this guy is an immediate plug-and-play left tackle, your franchise for a decade, and you have minimized the questions with that guy. You think he's that much better. Like you have Joe Alt as like the number 1 player on your board. He's sitting there at 8. Okay, that's one scenario. I don't know that that's going to happen, but that's one potential scenario. The second scenario is Brock Bowers, because the Saints could very well be in the market for tight end. Now, I don't know where they have Brock Bowers on their board, right? But Brock Bowers, especially considering Clint Kubiak and the way that he has used tight ends in his offenses, whether it was Kyle Rudolph in Minnesota, whether it was George Kittle in San Francisco, the prototype style tight end that he wants is Brock Bowers. Big, physical, hand in the dirt, inline blocker, who's also an extremely competent pass catcher. It is Kittle, it is Kelsey, it is that type tight end. And when you look at this draft board for this year, and you sort of rate the tight ends, like Mel Kiper on Tuesday came out with his rankings, he doesn't have another tight end sniffing the top 2 rounds. So if you're in the market for a tight end, that's a massive gap. So if you feel like Bowers, there's value, if you're going to go up to 8, again, as Loomis said, that's another player you might move up for. And the other would be receiver. And I think we all know that the Saints are going to be targeting offensive line and wide receiver. Yes, there's absolutely the component of draft the best player available. But it's also, with rare exceptions at the top of the draft, best player at biggest position of need. And if you have a tie, so to speak, you're going to err on the side of the position of need. Well, we don't know how the Saints stack their receivers in this draft. Harrison, Nabers, Odunze, those are the consensus top 3. But maybe the Saints have one of those guys rated higher than the others. So, what if there's 5 quarterbacks that come off the board, Joe Alt and, just hypothetically, Joe Alt and Malik Nabers, or Joe Alt and Marvin Harrison. So let's say Malik Nabers is sitting there at 8, and let's say they have Malik Nabers as the top receiver on their board, and they have him available potentially at 8. Well, do you do a deal to go up to take a guy? I'm just throwing out Nabers as a hypothetical because I don't know what the Saints board looks like. But do you potentially move up for that? That's where I could see the scenarios for the Saints moving up at 8, if as high as 8. And I couldn't see it anywhere else. It couldn't be an edge rusher. You signed Chase Young this offseason. You drafted Isaiah Foskey last year. It's hard to imagine that. The best interior defensive lineman in this draft, you drafted Brazil last. You're not going there. There isn't a safety on the board that you're going to take that high in the draft. Or you're set at corner. You're not moving up to take a player at that position. So those are the only scenarios that I could really and realistically see the Saints moving up as high as 8, as Mickey Loomis said there, potentially, if it comes to that and a player is available that they really covet. The other thing that is the big question we all have is, all right, the Saints don't have a 3rd or a 4th round pick. And you and I both know, and I've said I would, if it were possible, I would bet everything I own that the Saints don't wait from pick 45 until round 5 to make another selection. They are incapable of waiting. So Mickey Loomis was asked if they're actively looking to move into round 3 or round 4.
I wouldn't say that we're spending a lot of time thinking about that right now. We do the first round on Thursday, and then we have, the second and third on Friday. And so then, we have a whole evening, a whole day really to strategize about moving into the third and fourth round. And look, part of that depends upon who are the players available. Do we really want to move up? And look, when you have 4/5, that gives us an opportunity to, take a couple of those and bump it up. But we won't be thinking about that until we know who the players are that are going to be available. Is there someone that we've got really graded high that has dropped down? And man, let's put a target on them and find a way to go get that player, because that's what we've done historically.
For a guy who says they haven't given much thought to that, he sure sounds like he's given some thought to that, right? When you got 4 or 5s, let's see if we can package some of those together, see a guy we targeted that slip and go get him. That's what we've done historically. Yeah, Mick's given that a little bit of thought since those compensatory picks were made official. Listen, we all know it's going to happen. There is zero. And y'all, I don't speak only Siths speak in absolutes. I don't like to speak in absolutes because everything I say is recorded. And that's how you get on Twitter with Old Takes Exposed retweeting you. But there is a zero, clip it, Paul, a 0% chance that the Saints sit from pick 45 into round 5 and make 4 fifth-round picks. A 0% chance that happens. And for the record, I want them to trade up. I don't want them to take 9 players in this draft and have half of them not even make the team. I'd rather you be bullish on 4 or 5 guys and go get starters that are going to help you now. Draft gets underway on Thursday. I'm fired up for it. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.